Under whirring helicopter blades, a young woman holds her newborn baby as she is pushed in a wheelchair along the runway of the island airport to meet a man in a straitjacket being pushed in a wheelchair from the other direction. That day, the two 28-year-olds had been treated at the small hospital nearby. The woman was helped to deliver her first child. The man, shouting and out of control, was restrained and sedated. Orkney, a group of islands at the north of Scotland, sea-scoured and wind-battered between the North Sea and the Atlantic, has a good provision of services. Hospital, airport, cinema, 2 secondary schools, a supermarket. One thing it does not have, however, is a secure unit for people certified mentally ill and a danger to themselves and others. If someone is sectioned under the Mental Health Act, they have to be taken south to Aberdeen. This May evening, as I arrive into this island world, my father is taken out of it. My birth, 3 weeks early, has brought on a manic episode. My mum introduces the man, my dad, to his tiny daughter, and briefly places me in his lap before he is taken into the aircraft and flown away. "30 years later, back on the island again, I shelter beside an old freezer down by some stinging nettles and watch the weather approach over the sea. The waves crashing do not sound very different from the traffic in London. The farm is on the west edge of the main and largest island in Orkney, on the same latitude as Oslo and St. Petersburg, with nothing but cliffs and ocean between it and Canada. Each field has a prosaic name: Front Field or Lambing Field. The largest of the fields, the Outrun, is a stretch of coastland at the top of the farm, where the grass is always short, pummeled by wind and sea spray year-round. The Outrun is where the ewes and their lambs graze in summer, after they're taken up from the nursery fields. It's where the Highland cattle overwinter, running out under the huge sky. This land is the furthest reaches of a farm, only semi-tamed, where domestic and wild animals coexist and humans don't often visit. In a photo of the Outrun from the early 80s, I ride on Dad's shoulders, as he and Mum show visiting English friends the desolate-seeming land they have bought. Family and friends were surprised and unsure if they could make it work, as were the local Orcadians. They had watched many idealistic southerners move to the islands, only to leave after a couple of winters. It's a windy day. I leave the shelter of the freezer and walk up to the Outrun for the first time in years, breathing deeply. I find my favourite place, a slab of rock balanced at a precarious angle at the top of the cliff. I'd come here as a teenager, headphones on, dressed up and frustrated, looking out to the horizon, wanting to escape. From my spot on the stone, I would watch the breakers crash, the gulls and fighter jets flying out over the sea. The Outrun is tucked away behind a low hill and beside the coast, and in the right spot you can't see any houses or be seen from the road. Dad told me that when he was high, in a manic phase, he'd slept out here. At the end of the day, crouched away from the wind beside the freezer again, rolling a cigarette and eyeing the livestock, I've become my father. When I get back from my walk, instead of entering the farmhouse, I go to the machinery paddock and open the door to the caravan where Dad now lives. I was far away when the farmhouse was sold. Dad kept the farm and installed the caravan there for the nights he wasn't staying with his girlfriend, while Mum bought a house in town and rarely visited the farm again. Dad's wearing his outdoor boiler suit, with baler twine and a penknife always in the pockets, over a jumper that Mum knitted, which he still wears, now patched at the elbows. "Did you feel anything up there?" he asks, before beginning to tell me, although I've heard it before, about the tremors. Some people on the west coast of Orkney, including Dad, say they experience tremors or booms sometimes. Low echoes that seem strong enough to vibrate the whole island, while at the same time being quiet enough to make them wonder if they imagined it. Locals say they've felt the booms over many years, but are unable to identify a pattern to their occurrence. They wonder if it is geographical, man-made, even supernatural, or if it happens at all. It is possible that the booms and tremors are caused by wave action within caves deep below the fields. As a large wave travels into a dead-end cave, it traps and compresses air at high pressure. When the wave retreats, the air bubble explodes, causing a boom. I wonder if other, harder-to-grasp, even ghostly island forces could be at play. This stretch of coast and beaches has mysteries. Legends of sea monsters, like the huge stoorworm, whose hundreds of teeth fell out and formed the islands of Orkney, Shetland and the Faroes. Talking to Dad about the tremors, I feel slightly nervous. Our conversations are normally limited to the farm, so hearing him speak about uncanny sensations and strange geology makes me concerned that he might be getting high. Mum taught me to look for the signs. At first it could be exciting, with Dad talking a lot, full of optimism and energy. But this would bubble over into his making impulsive purchases, staying up all night, and moving animals at 4 a.m. Then grandiose thoughts, with him feeling he could change time and control the weather. He was 15 when he was first diagnosed with manic depression, now known as bipolar disorder, and schizophrenic tendencies. Since then, periodically, he has ups and downs of varying amplitude. Our family life was rocked by the waves of life at its extremes, by the cycles of manic depression. Once, when I was about 11, Dad was so ill that he went around the farmhouse smashing all the windows one by one. The wind flew through the rooms, whisking my schoolwork from my desk. Mum was a capable and caring woman who had been not much older than me when she found herself with 2 kids, abandoned on the day she gave birth, and many times after that. She turned to the church when my brother and I were small, and her husband was in a psychiatric ward 200 miles away. It's perhaps surprising that a manic depressive and a born-again Christian went on to stay together for as long as they did. The rumblings of mental illness under my life were amplified by my mother's extreme religion and the landscape I was born into. The continual, perceptible crashing of the sea at the edges. Ripples were set off the day I was born, and although I moved far away, the seizures I experienced as my drinking escalated felt as if the tremors had caught up with me too. The alcohol I'd been pouring into myself for years was like the repeated action of the waves on the cliffs, and it was beginning to cause physical damage. At 18, I couldn't wait to leave. I didn't want to be part of what I saw as a subtle conspiracy to present Orkney as an island paradise. I wanted comfort, glamour, and to be at the centre of things. I didn't understand people who said they wanted to live in the country where they could see wildlife. In the winter, forced into ugly outdoor clothes to help muck out the livestock, I dreamed of the hot pulse of the city. When I moved to London, I threw myself in. Several nights a week, I would get on the bus to the Soho and Shoreditch nightclubs that I'd read about in magazines. I would try out colouring in my eyebrows with red eyeliner, or slashing the back of a dress with scissors, and go down to the bus stop with a bottle. I made friends from online message boards and blogs, and while waiting for the band to come on. We were overgrown children, searching headlong for a good time. With our commutes and travel cards and high rents, we had to find new ways to make a community. Each weekend, when the sun shone, we went down to the park, to London Fields. Each weekend was more messed up than the last. We careered around, taking taxis and buying drinks we couldn't afford. When I made it home, I would lie on my bed with the window open. The Afghan shopkeeper downstairs was the only person who had anywhere near an idea how much I drank. As evenings and months progressed, my trips grew more frequent into the shop, where the light through the window was blocked out by fluorescent stars advertising special offers. Recently, back in Orkney, my friend Helga had told me that there is a mysterious vanishing island called Heather to the west of the island of Rousey. Although some Orcadians claim to have seen it, no one has ever been there. There are many versions of the story and different myths of imaginary or vanishing islands, often associated with foggy sea conditions. In Orkney, banks of sea mist appear and disappear quickly, perhaps the story's origin. Heather is still enchanted, rising only on rare occasions. Anyone who sees the island should row towards it while holding steel in their hand, always keeping their eyes on the shore. If you are able to set foot on Heather, you will free the island from its spell. When I left Orkney, I'd crossed a boundary not just of sea, but also of imagination. Because I came from an island, London was the fantasy, and London Fields was my Heather. I became accustomed to an unsustainable, enchanted lifestyle of summer days in the park, with beautiful people and intoxicated nights at parties. I didn't expect the spell to be broken, and I didn't want to find my way back through the mist to home. The first time he saw me, I was climbing on top of a phone box. He was a boyish American with mischievous eyes. I could feel the tremors. Although we didn't talk that night, I found out later that he'd written about me online. He was worried about me, but found me interesting. In those first weeks, I stopped in the pub on the way over to his house, and over a couple of pints, wrote him a letter about how I was scared alcohol would come between us. Back then, he had patience for my tears and blankouts. There were many more weekends and evenings after work in the park, with more and more people turning up. We felt at the centre of things. There was a gold rush of cool to this area of London, everyone afraid of missing out. After I met him, I took him along too, showing off our partnership to the group. I look back at photos from that time, and we're holding each other too tight, every limb and finger entwined, not looking at the camera. Sometimes a smell in the air would remind me sharply that I was living in England. I yearned for the open skies and grey stone of Orkney. I missed the curlews and oyster catchers, the fulmars noisily defending their nests, the puffins returning from far out to sea, even the black-backed gulls. Sometimes I'd be walking down Bethnal Green Road, surprised by the tears rolling silently down my face. I've heard it said that in London, you're always looking for either a job, a house, or a lover. I didn't realise how easily and how fast I could lose all three. It wasn't the breakup that tipped my drinking out of control, although I used it as an excuse. While I was still living with my boyfriend, I went to a friend's birthday party in a bar. I left after an hour or so, saying I was tired, when in fact I was going home to drink alone at a faster pace than the drinks were coming there. That evening I chose alcohol over friends and had crossed a line. After this I crossed lines quicker and quicker, choosing to drink, despite warnings from work, doctors, family and the law. I scanned the internet, blank-eyed for a solution that was not forthcoming. I cycled round East London aimlessly. I was running out of options. One night, I had a moment, just a glimpse, when I saw a sober life could not only be possible, but full of hope. Dazzling. I held on to that vision and told myself this was my last chance. If I didn't change, there was nowhere else for me to go but into more pain. On my belly, on the floor, back arched, arms stretched behind, fingers locked, I was trying to hold my breath. The teacher, attempting to put us in touch with our primal selves, said, "You were born to do this." And my pose collapsed in laughter with everyone else. A particularly difficult move had to be repeated 30 times, but the teacher promised, by the end you'll be flying. Addict soul. We chased that high. Had all my life been leading up to doing Kundalini yoga with a bunch of addicts in various states of physical disrepair and mental anguish on an institutional carpet? When I was younger, it was not my plan to be in rehab when I turned 30. This time I decided to put sobriety first. I saw my doctor and was referred to a drugs and alcohol advisory service. I drank heavily in the fortnight leading up to starting the programme and called my doubtful family while half-cut to explain my plans. When I told Dad I was doing this for 3 months, he was sympathetic and said, "I've spent 3 years of my life in psychiatric care. I hope it's less for you." I was often confused and upset about how I'd ended up there. I was a girl on a farm on an island, and I'd woken up to find it was 12 years later, and for some reason I was in a rehabilitation centre in London with a group of misfits drinking tea from chipped mugs. We went into detail about our pasts, and I shared dark and shameful things I'd never told anyone else. Well, we all did. And it created trust and a bond between us, unlike anything I'd experienced before. Unlike drunken confidences and late-night conversations, I could remember these the next day. I knew that everything good happening in my life, regaining the trust of my family, possibilities of new work, a slight confident step, was reliant on me staying sober. I had to stay vigilant. I thought about drinking all the time. It was there, at the back of my mind, like tinnitus, with regular, intense cravings shooting through my body. Back in my bedsit on Friday and Saturday nights, I'd tensely smoke out of the window, listening to the pub downstairs, wondering if this was all there was to sobriety. I was fit, healthy, clean, and home alone again all weekend, too scared to go anywhere. If this was the future, I didn't want it. I was speaking to my parents more. Dad needed some help on the farm, and Mum encouraged me to come up for a visit. Although it was nearly winter, a short time in the island air while I was applying for jobs might help me regain my strength and appetite. I agreed with Mum that some space would do me good, but part of me, the addict, had other ideas. Going back to Orkney would be a test. If I got to a year sober, still hadn't found decent work and still felt frustrated, I would get an anonymous job somewhere, maybe as a cleaner, move into another rented room, cut myself off, and just drink. It would feel so good to give in. On my last trip home, I spent the entire 7-hour ferry journey in the bar and had to be helped off the boat by strangers. This time, I am able to stand out on deck as the ferry arrives into Kirkwall around midnight, feeling the salty wind on my face as the lights of the harbour grow closer in the night. When Mum meets me, I see her relief. I've got a fresh start, but I'm not sure what to use it for. So I'm going to make myself useful, helping Dad, building walls in the short hours of daylight and staying in his caravan at night. A dry stone dyke is actually 2 walls, built to be flat on the outer faces, joined at the top by large linking stones and filled in the middle with smaller loose ones. The stones are heavy and ancient, and modern technology seems flimsy. I start to think in decades and centuries, rather than days and months. I'm repairing these dikes at the same time as I'm putting myself back together. I am building my defences. And each time I don't take a drink when I feel like it, I am strengthening new pathways in my brain. I have to work with the stones I've got, and can't spend too long worrying if I'm making the perfect wall. I just have to get on with placing stones. It's not until later that spring that I see my first living cetaceans, the names for whales, dolphins and porpoise. On a small rigid inflatable boat, returning from the uninhabited island of Coppensee, we are suddenly among a pod of harbour porpoise. The captain cuts the engine and they surface intermittently, 6 or 10 of them, close enough that we can hear them breathe. I'd always known that the porpoise were out there, but to see and be among them is more moving than I'd imagined. An unexpected bonus at the end of a magical trip on the tiny island. Around the north of Scotland lie many uninhabited islands, abandoned in the mid-20th century when the forces of depopulation reached such strength that the last residents could no longer cling on. Coppensee is 1 mile long and half a mile wide to the east of the Orkney archipelago. Its population reached a peak of 25 in 1931, but the last residents left for Orkney mainland in 1958. I travelled to spend the night in Coppensee with seabird researchers Juliet and Ivan, who were going there to study the fulmar, shag, kittiwake and razorbill. The island is now a bird reserve, home in the summer to thousands of nesting seabirds. There are no scheduled ferries to it, and we make the 40-minute journey on a small vessel with the local boatman, who moors the boat at Coppensee's crumbling jetty, overlooked by a derelict farmhouse. In an upstairs bedroom, I pitch my tent, deciding to sleep in there for warmth, rather than outside in the wind. The house is startlingly similar to the one I grew up in, a late 19th century Orkney farmhouse built on the site of previous steadings. The Groats were the last family on the island and had 13 children. Under the decaying stairs, I find coat pegs marked with their names. There are still beds and other furniture in the house that the family left. The lighthouse, the only other dwelling on the island, was automated in 1990. As much as it is bleak, Coppensee is also dizzyingly beautiful. To the north is the even smaller, inaccessible island, the Horse of Coppensee. The Norse like to zoomorphise small islands, with cliffs rising straight out of the sea. A flock of more than 50 puffins is swimming near the coast, with more perched on the cliff top among the sea pinks. The view from the cliff top, back down the steeply sloping island to the farmhouse, across a curving tidal causeway, is one of the best in Orkney. Until around 1914, brave and hungry islanders took part in fowling on Coppensee, catching seabirds from the cliffs for their flesh, eggs and feathers, known as swapping for ox in Orcadian dialect. These days the birds are caught only for conservation research. I go out with Juliet and Ivan around Coppensee's cliffs and geos, looking for birds. They catch shags by extending an 8-foot fishing pole down the cliff to their nests. Ivan loops the bird in a kind of noose, lifts it and passes it up to Juliet, who grapples it, flapping and honking. A GPS tag is carefully taped to the feathers on its back, and over the next few days, every 100 seconds, the tag will communicate with satellites and plot the shag's location. Being on a small island brings a strange mixture of freedom and confinement. A year ago I was in rehab in London. Now I'm lying star-shaped in the centre of the helicopter pad built to service the lighthouse on an uninhabited island in the North Sea, and bonxies, the Orcadian name for great skuas, fly above me. I walk back down the hill, fall asleep for an hour in a sheltered spot by the bay, and dream of being a seabird on a high ledge. I'm still in Orkney as spring approaches and decide I will stay a bit longer on the farm as Dad's lambing assistant. The job applications I've sent with dwindling enthusiasm to London have been unsuccessful, and I realise I'm also a little scared of returning. Being on the island, on the farm, has seemed to help me stay safe and sober. By not drinking one day at a time, I have now been sober for more than a year, something back then I could not have believed would happen. Between the lambs, there are other jobs. Building up more broken dyke, cutting down rogue thistles, feeding the poultry that peck around the farmyard. It's only lately I've been able to see beyond the dirt and hard work to some of the benefits of the farming lifestyle. At school, the question wasn't which football team you supported, but which make of tractor was your favourite. But I never joined the young farmers. I read music and fashion magazines, and American novels. Now, browsing the internet in my tea break, still in my padded boiler suit, I suddenly feel frustrated, like I did when I was a teenager. I want to wear a dress and go into town, but I can't. Reluctantly, I begin looking in the Situations vacant page of the Orcadian each week. I spot an advert for a summer job working on a bird conservation project. And although I was pretty sure I'd be back in my real life in London before long, something about it appealed to me. I thought it wouldn't hurt to send off an application. It's 2 a.m. on a Friday night, and I'm alone down a farm track, dancing in the glow of my headlights, because I heard the call I know belongs to a medium-sized endangered brown bird. Unexpectedly, I got the job working on the Corncrake Initiative, a long-running conservation project, and rather than return to London, signed a contract for a summer in Orkney. Corncrakes, sometimes known as landrails, are similar in size and shape to moorhens, but brown with a ginger wing and pink beak, inhabiting farmland rather than wetland. At one time, they were common across the whole of the UK. Now they are found only on the Western Isles and Orkney. The main reason for the decline is increasingly mechanised farming methods. Most corncrakes live in fields intended for hay or silage, and when the big grass mowers come to cut the grass, the birds move away from the moor into the ever-decreasing area of uncut grass and are eventually caught in the middle of the field and mown down on the final swathe. My job is to locate every calling male corncrake in Orkney. Only the males call. I appeal for public reports, asking people to call my corncrake hotline if they hear one. The sound is like a credit card being scraped over a comb, or like the corncrake's onomatopoeic Latin name, crex crex. Corncrakes call throughout the night, peaking between midnight and 3 a.m, when the males are at the centre of their territories. I leave the house around 11, nightclub time, dressed in warm layers, having filled my thermos with coffee rather than wine, and made sure my phone is charged. Corncrakes are elusive. I stop every 250 to 500 metres, wind down the windows, and listen for 2 minutes. In the weeks around midsummer in Orkney, it barely gets dark overnight. The time between sunset and sunrise is known as the simmer dim, or the grimlins, from the Old Norse word grimla, which means to twinkle or glimmer. Even at 1 a.m, the birds are going bonkers. I note down unfamiliar calls to ask my knowledgeable colleagues back in the office. Creaking bed springs. Haunted chicken. They inform me that the shivery baby goat sound I hear is snipe drumming, an eerie, memorable wobble made by its tail feathers. At times I'm scared, down an unfamiliar country road alone at night, shocked by a scarecrow. I'm connected to the world through my phone, online maps helping me navigate in the dark. On Friday and Saturday nights, I think about what my friends are doing back in London, reading their drunken tweets before they delete them in the morning. As I drive, I try to unpick what happened. All the houses I've lived in, the lost jobs, the treatment centre, my aching heart. At first, I counted the days I had been sober, then the weeks. Now it's just the months, and the cravings come less frequently, but they still come. Driving home in a beautiful dawn, the only person on the road, listening to happy hardcore, I feel like the Queen of Orkney. Then suddenly all I want is a bottle of wine. And it's a good thing the island has no 24-hour off licences. Once I've located the corncrakes, I visit the landowners. Older Orcadians tend to refer to women, regardless of marital status, as wives, so, arriving at farms to speak to farmers about the endangered birds on their land, I am announced with, "The corncrake wife is here." The reserve offers the farmers money to delay cutting or grazing the grass, or to mow in a corncrake-friendly pattern from the inside of the fields outwards, giving the birds more of a chance to escape. Every farmer is willing to discuss the options with me, and most are able to change the mowing pattern. No one flat out refuses. That's not really the Orcadian way. Some just say they'll think about it. Then I never hear back. I learn as much as I can about this one species. I set an internet alert for corncrake references in the world's media. Somehow, this bird has become my thing. I heard that in June 2011, 50 adult male corncrakes were caught on the Hebridean island of Coll, lured into nets by a taped call of what they thought was a rival male. Geolocators, weighing less than a gram, were attached to their legs on plastic rings. The following summer, some of the birds were re-caught, and their tags revealed that they had travelled all the way to the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Central Africa. This seems incredible. In Scotland, corncrakes are reluctant to fly at all, which is what makes them so vulnerable to farm machinery. There is even local folklore about them going underground instead of migrating, turning into moorhens, or perhaps riding on other birds' backs. But fly they do, although just 30% of adults survive the migration to return to Orkney the following year. One night I realise I'm feeling easier and more normal. Even lucky to live and work here in Orkney. This is a different kind of nightlife. The life I had in the city, parties and clubs, is no longer there for me. But these never nights, marking off-grid references and following maps in the mist, they are my own. I've found no corncrakes tonight, but dawn is coming. I've got a flask of coffee, and I can hear seals. Then, just after 3 a.m, something unexpected happens. It's just a moment, but there it is, in the road, right in front of me. Running into the grass verge, its image, the pink beak and ginger wing, keeps darting through my mind. My first and only corncrake sighting. Usually dawn comes slowly, but tonight I drive out of a cloud, and suddenly it's a new day. After the corncrake season finishes, and they have migrated back to Central Africa, I choose to go even further from the city. I'm spending the winter on Papa Westry, known as Pappy, the most northwesterly and one of the smallest inhabited Orkney Islands, just 4 miles long by 1 mile wide, with 70 residents. The house I'm staying in on Pappy is named Rose Cottage for its lurid pink paint job. It's at the narrowest part of the island, just 500 metres from each side to the sea. Through the 2 windows in the kitchen, facing south and east, I can see the water surrounding the island on 3 sides. Having my own place again is a risk. This would be the perfect location to do some solitary drinking. While I was the corncrake wife, I was busy and professional and rarely mentioned what had happened to me in the previous few years. Here, I have time and space, so I'm able to let myself think about how and why I made the decisions I did, and in particular, what made me realise that opting for rehab and total sobriety was not an overreaction. Although I know the attack back in London over a year ago wasn't my fault, it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been so drunk. I'd been drinking all through the day before going to a warehouse party. As I stumbled back in the vague direction of my brother's house, where I was sleeping on the sofa, a car stopped beside me, and although I can't remember exactly what he said, the driver asked me to get in, and I did. I remember having some kind of mundane conversation about the best routes, and I think I asked to be taken home. Then the driver of the car punched me in the face as hard as he could. I knew I had to escape. I opened the car door, but we were still moving. He stopped, picked up a large heavy boot from the footwell, and hit me over the back of the head. I knew with no doubt that he wanted to knock me out, if not kill me. He began dragging me by my ankles into the park towards some trees. He was not a big man, and didn't have a weapon. Although I'd never experienced violence like that before, childhood play fights with my brother came back to me, and I knew I had a chance of overpowering him. I screamed for help and shouted, "I am stronger than you, I am stronger than you," kicking and struggling as he tore at my tights. I saw 3 men coming towards me. Moments later, it seemed, we were surrounded by flashing lights and people, and my attacker had gone. Last midwinter, soon after I returned to Orkney, I began to be interested in astronomy. The long winter nights, combined with the lack of light pollution and the open landscape without trees, tall buildings or mountains, make it an ideal location for stargazing. Under certain conditions, the Andromeda Galaxy can be seen by the naked eye from here, something only possible in places with really dark skies. One evening, I went to the first ever gathering of the Orkney Astronomical Society. Since then, I've been outside at nights, taking my astronomy stance. Head back, mouth open, getting dizzy. In mid-December each year, the Earth passes through a cloud of debris left by an asteroid called 3200 Phaethon. When tiny pieces of dust and ice from this cloud hit the Earth's atmosphere at around 134,000 miles per hour, they burn up to create what we know as shooting stars. But of course they aren't stars at all. Meteors are what we see as shooting stars, ablating as they collide with the atmosphere, creating this annual Geminid meteor shower. On Pappy, one night around 11:30 p.m, I take a chair and a duvet into the garden, lean back and fill my gaze with sky. I've turned out all the lights in the house, even closing my laptop so nothing spills outside. I scan the Milky Way with binoculars. In half an hour, I see 19 meteors, leaving streaks of brilliant light just for a second. This year also sees a solar maximum, the period of greatest activity in the sun's 11-year cycle, and I become wild on northern lights, known locally as the Merry Dancers. When electrically charged particles expelled by the sun collide with the Earth's atmosphere, lights are created, following the lines of the Earth's magnetic forces, shifting and combining to create the dancing effect. We are far enough north here to experience them fairly regularly. Just outside the front door of Rose Cottage, with the house lights turned out, is a perfect spot to watch the northern lights, an unobscured northern vista. In my first couple of weeks on Pappy, I see the Merry Dancers more clearly than I ever have before. In the past, I have seen a greenish-tinged, gently glowing arc low across the north. But tonight, there is static in the air, and the whole sky is alive with shapes. White searchlights beaming from behind the horizon, dancing waves directly above, and slowly, thrillingly, blood-red blooms. Maybe things are not going to be so bad. I've swapped disco lights for celestial lights, but I'm still surrounded by dancers. I haven't drunk alcohol for 20 months, 2 weeks and 4 days. I'm enjoying the simple challenges of keeping myself warm and fed. I'm learning how to behave decently in everyday life after years of confusion. My possessions are scattered. My ties and traditions are my own to make. I can choose where I will belong. When I arrived at Rose Cottage, I made sure my broadband was working before the hot water. Wherever I am, I spend most of my time with a laptop online, so I might as well do it in the calm and beautiful surroundings of Pappy. In the past decade or so, the internet has made island life possible for more people. The ability to work remotely increases hope that the fragile populations of some of the smaller islands will not only stabilise, but grow. Since I've been sober and in Orkney, I'm online more than ever, as a way of keeping myself linked to the old life I'm not prepared to cut ties with. I'm keeping in spectral communication with the ghosts of my past. There can be connection problems. Our internet in Pappy comes through the copper phone lines, as the population size doesn't justify the phone companies installing fibre optic cables. The signal is sent by microwaves from Kirkwall to Shappensea, to Sandy, to Estuary, then to us. The mobile signal can be affected by the wind. I'm waiting for the next gale to receive my text messages. In the islands, in the age of digital media, technology can bring us closer to the wild. When an unusual bird, such as a sea eagle, is seen in the sky above Orkney, or a pod of orca along the coastline, people pass messages immediately via a local birding forum or text message groups, so that others can rush out to see them. Alerts on the possibilities of seeing the northern lights circulate on the social networks, and the same night, or the next day, people share their photographs. On Sandy, a webcam is trained on the colony of grey seals that pup in November. I post a link online, and my friends in offices in London watch the hulking grey females hauled up on the beach with their white, teddy bear-like pups. We chat while watching seals caught before dawn by the night vision camera. I begin to use a GPS app on my phone to track my daily walks around Pappy, along sheep trails and high water lines. I'm building a map, revealing the lines I am drawn along. The GPS tracker shows how my walks change. As the weeks go on, I become slower and more exploratory, covering smaller areas in greater detail, looking in rock pools for treasures. Cross-referencing the shoreline with the Ordnance Survey map in my pocket, the maps on my phone, and my physical and visual experience, I am locating myself, putting the correct names to the inlets and outcrops. For me, these places exist both digitally and underfoot. Orkney and Shetland often used to appear in a box at the side of the map to the east of Britain, rather than the north. Now, Google Maps stretches endlessly around the globe. Late at night, I keep ending up on the satellite view of Sulskerry to the west of the Outrun, just beyond the horizon, home in the spring to thousands of breeding puffins and gannets. It seems the tides are strong around these parts of the internet, pushing me back here, again and again. I am able to point my phone at the night sky and name which stars and planets are in that direction. The program on my phone marks the horizon like a spirit level, providing a digital gravity, even on the windiest, darkest night. Down there, on the other side of the world, is the International Space Station. Astronauts on board tweet photographs of their view back to us on Earth, and people reply with long exposure images they took of the station passing above. A trail of light across the continents. One morning, I have a tip-off on social media that orca have been seen hunting dolphins along the west coast of Orkney, heading north. I go out to the North Hill and look for them. I am all eyes, my body efficiently insulated. I don't see any whales, but I watch a huge ship just disappearing from view. Back at the cottage, I look on the marine traffic website and find that she is a Russian cargo ship with a destination of Kandalaksha in northern Russia. With all these tabs open on my browser, I feel omniscient, watching how global transport logistics dance and intersect, never crashing, like flocks of starling. I'm not tracking a mysterious or endangered species. I'm carrying out semi-scientific studies into myself, performing bathymetry of the soul. The internet counts every song I listen to, constantly updating lists of my favourite artists and recommending new ones. My Facebook prioritises the friends I interact with. I jostle for tweets. I'm in an ever-changing process of defining myself, fascinated by counting and plotting and marking my daily activities and movements, collecting bottomless data. I've been tracking my sleep cycles and carrying out surveys of my dreams. With my phone, I record the noise of the wind and rain on my rose cottage bedroom window late one night during a gale. I record the sound of the breaking waves at Foul Craig, the grey-lag geese that sometimes mysteriously honk and rise late at night, wind in the telegraph wires, and the familiar hum of the propeller plane. I upload my recordings to the internet, 20-second sensory postings from my island life, like poems. Sometimes, though, all this hyperconnection just makes me lonelier. Chatting on Skype, looking at the screen rather than the camera, creates a dissociation, a not quite eye contact. We spend too much time online, and real life is just another window. What's the point in going out to look at wildlife when I can watch nature documentaries on YouTube, in bed, with an electric blanket? I half wake in the night with rootless anxiety and grasp for my phone. Lately, I've been tidying up trails I left in different parts of the internet under multiple identities some years ago while drunk. I used to spill my heart over the internet, like red wine. Cross-addiction is the idea that, in the absence of drink, alcoholics will transfer their addictive behaviour to something else. It is commonly seen with food, exercise, shopping or gambling. For me, it's Coca-Cola, smoking, relationships and the internet. There's an emptiness. I've lost booze and I'm desperately searching for what I need to fill me up. Is it coffee, sex, writing, love, new clothes, or online approval? I read about how these beeps and notifications and vibrations affect and alter our brains, giving small jolts of dopamine, a little adrenaline. Searching for that tiny buzz, I'm circling round familiar websites like a migrating bird following rivers or motorways. The red notification of a message I've been waiting for gives me a shadow of the sensation of the first sip of beer, of cold water when you're parched, of a soft bed when you're exhausted, of giving up swimming when you're ready to drown. I have 20 tabs open on my laptop, each an endless journey, an unfinished thought. I can't go to sleep yet. There are too many tabs open in my brain. I'm trying to find the right thing to fill this hole, but it always eludes me, just at the brink of my consciousness, the corner of my eye, the island just over the horizon. I take a step back from my blank-minded mouse clicking and notice how, when my phone runs out of batteries, I can almost feel I don't exist. My walk no longer being tracked. I'm aware of my addictive and obsessive tendencies. I'm using technology to take myself to the centre of something from my spot at the edge of the ocean. With my digital devices, the planes and birds and stars seem more quantifiable and trackable. I'm trying to make a connection with the world outside Pappy and my old life. I take a photograph of the sun setting over Westry and put it online. My sky is converted into zeros and ones. My personal data beamed to satellites, bounced through fibre optic cables under the sea, through microwaves, copper wire, and over islands. Now I'm back from Pappy. I've joined an eccentric group called the Orkney Polar Bears, who every Saturday morning, year-round, go swimming in the sea at a different location around the islands. I prepare by eating porridge and listening to aggressive rap. The swims are a way to experience the changing seasons and different parts of Orkney, location decided following analysis of the tides and wind direction. We've swum at a bridge beside the main road, where we were beeped at by passing lorries. At a secluded sandy beach reached by a drive down a long potholed track, and then climbing over fences getting stung by nettles in rock pools in the harbour. We make a strange group, changing car side into our swimming costumes with our woolly hats and goosebumps. We often swim to shipwrecks, the Second World War block ships that lie around Orkney's coast. Up close, their rusting hulls loom above us. We see the land from a different perspective and have encounters with birds. I once swam right up to a black guillemot and have had Arctic terns diving nearby. It is always gaspingly cold. The sea temperature gets gradually higher all summer to an average of 13 degrees in September. Then, when the air temperature becomes cooler than the water, it goes down to 4 or so degrees in February. The first time felt like it was burning my skin, but each Saturday it gets slightly easier, although I am the wimpiest member of the club, back on shore drying myself while the others are still breaststroking around the pier. Seals pop their heads close by when we swim, interested in our human presence, looking at us with familiar eyes. We are mirror images, both at the edge of our worlds, only able to share a small proportion of our territory. I'm not the first person to think a seal is my friend. Selkie is the Orcadian word for seal, but it also has links to the tales of seals shifting into human form. Selkies, it is said, slip from their sealskins as beautiful naked people who dance on beaches under the moon. If the sealskin was lost or stolen, the Selkies would be unable to transform back. There are stories of men hiding skins and taking a seal maiden as a wife, but she would always belong in the sea. By swimming in the sea, I cross the normal boundaries. I'm no longer on land, but part of the body of water making up all the oceans of the world, which moves, ebbing and flowing under and around me. Naked on the beach, I am a Selkie, slipped from its skin. During each of the first few swims, there is a point when my body panics. I picture drowning, and knowing the depth beneath me, my heart rate increases. I swim because I want to shock myself awake. I want to blast away the frustrations of being stuck on this island, and I no longer have the outlet of getting drunk. The chilly immersion is addictive, verging on unpleasant at the time, but I find myself craving it, agreeing to go again, planning my next swim, eyeing up lochs, bays or reservoirs. Lately, I've noticed a gradual reprogramming. I used to confuse my neurotransmitters on a Friday night in a hot nightclub. Now I shock my senses on a Saturday morning in a biting sea, plunging warm skin into cold water, forcing a rush of sensation. Cleansed. When I pull myself out up the slipway, climbing the ladder onto the pier or washing up with the waves onto the beach, I feel saved, reborn, and very alive. On geological maps of Orkney, a division runs through Pappy, through the area of Rose Cottage, splitting the North Hill. During my time on the island, I search for the fault line, although I'm not sure what it will look like. On the hill one day, I sit to watch the sea and think about Dad. Although he's not seen a shrink in 15 years or taken medication in 10, he's been slightly agitated, erratic and excitable in recent weeks, behaving in the way that makes people who've known him for a long time fear he's heading for a manic episode. As a wave breaks, sending clumps of foam in my direction, it strikes me that I know how he feels, because I used to feel like that when I was drinking. Symptoms of mania are similar to drunkenness: feeling high and optimistic, racing thoughts, impaired judgment and impulsiveness, acting recklessly. Each binge drinking session is a manic-depressive cycle in miniature. The next day's hangover is the inevitable depressive period that follows. Coming back sometime later, you survey the damage and eroded relationships. apologise, and make promises to control it better next time. Lost in self-pity and self-obsession. I first encountered Dee when she emailed offering her support as another sober woman in Orkney. At that point, I didn't know that I would be coming to live on her island. She and her husband Mo had moved to Pappy 4 years previously. I had not asked anyone to be my sponsor, and I was only interested in someone who shared my prejudices and didn't mention Jesus. Something occurs to me that I've never thought of before. Perhaps my drinking was in part an attempt to attain the manic states I'd experienced through my father. Seems so simple, and, unlike many other explanations I'd been offered for my drinking, makes sense. The idea that I'm not mentally ill, but was pursuing my own mania, fits with what I was searching for with alcohol and how I tried to make myself feel. In a way, my drunkenness was an attempt to emulate and even impress my dad. I was wild and free and alive. I stand up from my stone seat. I've made a breakthrough in understanding my own behaviour. I didn't find it in a therapist's office, or by conscientiously working through the programme, or by talking to my AA sponsor, but outdoors, watching the waves. On this hill, I have found something that could be the fault line, a faint, rocky ridge. But in many ways, it doesn't matter what the cause is or where the fault line started. What matters is that I recognise the problem, which AA neatly summarises in step 1. We admitted we are powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2 says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. My sponsor asks me before our next session to consider if I believe that there is a power greater than myself. Reluctantly, I think about the forces that I have experienced living on the islands, the wind and the sea. I think of erosion and corrosion. Despite my discomfort that the question might push me into dubious areas of spirituality that I find hard to grasp, I decide that I can accept the existence of some powers greater than myself. And not God, just the things I've always known, the forces I've grown up with, strong enough to smash up ships and carve islands. I don't go to the south of the island often, but today I visit the Loch of Treadwell for the first time. A small circular promontory juts into the loch. Once an island, it is an early Christian site with the remains of a chapel dating back to around the 8th century and older archaeological remains that have been dated to the Iron Age. St Treadwell, also known as Triduana, was courted by Pictish king Necton, who admired her beautiful eyes. In response, Triduana gouged them out and sent them to him, skewered on a thorn. I read different accounts of the story, some saying that the king tried to rape her and her actions were self-preservation, others suggesting it was an act of love. By the 12th century, the chapel in the loch became a place of pilgrimage, particularly for the blind or those with eye trouble. It's said pilgrims walked 3 times around the loch, then bathed their eyes in its healing waters. I avoid thinking or talking about God and faith. It makes my heart beat faster and anger rise inside me. Although I don't want to get rid of my cool, rational mind, I do want to stay sober, so I know I must face these feelings. Step 3 suggests that we make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. My sponsor asks me to think about turning something over as simply looking at things from a different angle. I have good eyesight and little faith, but today, as a gesture toward trying new things, I recreate the pilgrim's ritual, walking around the loch anti-clockwise. According to the GPS tracker on my phone, the circumnavigation is 3.1 miles and will take me 78 minutes. What am I expecting from this ritual? Do I somehow think that coming here, bravely facing the winter alone, will make me a better person or cure me? Am I hoping for a miracle? If I walk the right configuration around the loch, will Triduana remove my addiction? In my notebook, I have written my own Step 3 prayer. I pick up a small stone from the promontory and begin to read it out loud. Thinking about the idea of turning it over, I throw the stone into the loch, watching the ripples it leaves until they disappear. On Pappy, Fair Isle has been a spectre at the edge of my field of vision, just over the horizon. Orkney and Shetland are in the Fair Isle sea area of the shipping forecast, and, getting ready for bed, my ears tune in when its name is read. Wind, easterly or northeasterly, 60 gale 8. Sea state, rough or very rough. Wintry showers. Visibility good, occasionally poor. On the 13th day of Christmas, I'm the only passenger alongside a backlog of postbags on the Islander plane from Tingwall Airport on mainland Shetland. We fly over miles of water before Fair Isle appears on the horizon, rising spectacularly from the sea. Fair Isle is unlike anywhere I've been. Everywhere you turn there are dramatic views of the coastline, sweeping curves cut off by towering cliffs. The improbable ski slope of sheep rock gives the island a distinctive profile, and it seems preposterous that, until 1977, sheep were kept there, winched on and off, one by one, using ropes from boats far below. A bird hide has been built straight up from a cliff, and I edge inside. The cliffs are busy with foamers, so in the breeding season it must be teeming. A black-backed gull is perched on the peak of an iceberg-shaped skerry, like a pirate king. The only piece of land in a large area of sea on the flight path between Scandinavia, Iceland, the Faroes and the rest of Europe, Fair Isle is famous for its bird observatory. Ornithologists come to see its breeding seabird colonies, as well as to find migrating rarities in spring and autumn. I'm a rare January visitor, so people on the island know I'm there before I meet them. The woman in the shop knows where I'm staying. But what am I doing here on Fair Isle in January? A single woman with no easy explanation. I'm not a birder or someone tracing my family history. I'm not sure. It's just that I've been scrolling over online maps and reading websites for ages, and now I'm here. My leisure time is no longer filled with drinking and nights out, and I don't have children or many responsibilities, so this is what I'm doing instead. Visiting increasingly remote northern places, following the map to the edge. This is the story of what happens after you stop drinking. This is the freedom of sobriety. Back in Orkney, surveyors and businessmen have been to visit Dad on the farm, and there is talk of money. The Outrun has been chosen as the preferred site to build a huge substation to serve the tidal and wave energy devices proposed to be tethered to the seabed at sites off the West Mainland. Our location, between the Atlantic and the North Sea, means there are strong and fast-flowing currents around Orkney. Our waters are potentially energy-rich. The developers are interested in buying 100 acres of land, 62 from Dad, including most of the Outrun. 2 huge buildings are planned, each with a footprint of 10 acres. Even if the farmers don't want to sell, the development is important enough potentially to force a compulsory purchase order. I've returned to the island at exciting times. I'm generally in favour of renewable energy. This is a new way of using the land and our natural resources, reducing our use of fossil fuels and providing income for the islands into the 21st century. But the idea that this beautiful, barely touched stretch of land where I grew up, where I chased lambs, watched birds and hid with my brother, should become an industrial zone is dizzying. Things change and move on. The Outrun could be sold for the substation, but the waves will still crash indifferently up against its cliffs. The engineers laying the cables will feel the tremors. The same wind that whistles through the windows of my little house will turn the blades of the turbines, cutting the air in an endless pattern. The spring equinox is soon. I will be 2 years sober. Although I mainly rely on my own forms of therapy, walking, swimming, I have started going through the rest of the 12 steps. designed to be a programme for sustainable living. The forces that I grew up with are being utilised in unexpected ways. Recovery is making use of something once thought worthless. I might have been washed up, but I can be renewed. I didn't know what would happen when I got sober, when I launched myself into the unknown future. I didn't know my strongest desire would be to hear the rasping call of the corncrake. I didn't know I would put my energy into searching for elusive birds and merry dancers, into swimming in cold seas, sailing to abandoned islands, flying on tiny planes, coming back home. I didn't know I'd find myself alone, climbing a steep hill on the country's most remote island during a gale in early January, buffeted by spindrift. But I had to give myself the chance to find out. I never saw myself as, and resist becoming, the wholesome outdoors type. But the things I experience keep dragging me in. There are moments that thrill and glow. The few seconds a silver male hen harrier flies beside my car one afternoon. The porpoise surfacing around our small boat. The wonderful sight of a herd of cattle let out on grass after a winter indoors, skipping and jumping, tails straight up to the sky with joy. I am free-falling, but grabbing these things as I plunge. Maybe this is what happens. I've given up drugs, don't believe in God, and love has gone wrong. So now I find my happiness and flight in the world around me. The last 2 years stretch and glitter behind me like the wake of a ferry. The powers are churning inside me.
The Outrun by Amy Liptrot was read by Tracy Wiles. It was abridged by Sarah Davies and the producer was Simon Richardson.